Good morning, church. It's good to see you guys. Hey, my name is Daniel Norris. I am one of the pastors here at New Beginnings, and I'm excited to be with you today as we wrap up a very powerful series that we've been in over the last couple of weeks called Hostage. We have seen the Lord do some amazing things over the last few weeks, and I believe today is no different. Amen? I believe the Lord wants to meet with us in a powerful way. As we kick this morning off, I need your help. Can y'all help me out a little bit? All right, here's what I'm going to need you to do. I'm going to ask you a couple of questions, and when I do, I don't even need you to answer with your voice. I just simply need you to raise your hand. Let's go ahead and practice. Can y'all raise your hands for me? All right, when I ask the question, if the answer is yes, just raise your hand and keep it up. Keep it up as long as the answer is yes. All right, you ready for this? Here we go. Have you ever been in a large room like this and felt all alone? Okay, keep them up, keep them up. Have you ever had weeks where your schedule was really, really full, but your life felt pretty empty? Have you ever had weeks where you've had lots and lots of conversations, but very little authentic connection? Have you ever gone through seasons of life where you feel like you know a lot of people, but you're not really known by anyone? Keep them up. Here's what I want you to do. Look around. Look to your left, look to your right. Here's what I want you to know this morning. You're not alone in feeling alone. Did you hear me? Did y'all hear that this morning? You're not alone. Look around. You saw all the hands. You're not alone in feeling alone. Loneliness is real, isn't it? Like we've all experienced it. We've all felt it. I've been a pastor for almost 20 years now. And can I just tell you, there have been seasons where I've been in a room like this, full of people, but felt all alone. There have been weeks and weeks where my schedule is really, really full, but my life feels pretty empty. There have been days and weeks where I've had lots and lots of conversations with lots of different people, but very little authentic connection. And there have been times over the years where, if I'm being honest, even as a pastor, like I feel like we're supposed to know a lot of people and know what's going on in all of your lives, and I love that. I love that calling that God has on our lives. So we know a lot of people, and we know a lot about your lives and what's going on. But if I'm being honest, we know a lot of people, but a lot of times myself, I'm talking about myself, I feel known by no one. You see, loneliness is a very complex issue. It's a global epidemic. Loneliness does not discriminate. It affects all people of all ages, from all backgrounds and all different walks of life. Men, can we just get real for a moment? Like, I know I see a lot of big, strong, manly men in this room, and here's what we think. I'm not lonely. I don't need anybody. I'm good. I don't need anybody, and I don't need anybody to need me. Like, I'm good on my own. Statistics would show us that men are 5 times, everybody say 5 times more lonely than we were in 1990. That's about 24 years ago. So in 24 years, a little over 2 decades, men have become more and more lonely, 5 times more lonely than we've ever been. For the first time in history, we're seeing the younger generation, the younger population, Gen Z and below. Listen to this. This is parents, grandparents, you got to lean in and listen to this. For the first time in history, the younger generation is lonelier than the sick and elderly. That should alarm you. that this younger generation is lonelier than the sick and elderly that are living in assisted living and nursing homes. Something has gone wrong. Would you agree? We are more connected than we've ever been through technology, and yet we are lonelier and more isolated than we've ever been. Loneliness is holding us hostage. Listen to this. Loneliness, is not a personal struggle. It's not just a personal struggle. Loneliness is a spiritual battle against the enemy's tactics to keep us isolated and disconnected from the life that Jesus wants us to experience in Him and with one another. Would you pray with me? Father, you saw every hand that went up in this room earlier. God, I'm asking you that you would meet with every person in this room and those watching online, that you would meet them at their greatest point of need today. Father, would you break every stronghold in their life? God, would you set captives free today by the power of your word and the presence of your Holy Spirit? We ask all this in Jesus' name. And all of God's people said, amen. Hey, if you have your Bibles, open up to John chapter 4. That's where we're going to be camping out this morning. I'm going to go ahead and apologize. I'm going to take lots of drinks this morning because I've been a little under the weather all week. And so I'm on all kinds of medication and I'm on the struggle bus this week. And so I'm going to be sipping lots of water. But John chapter 4 is where we're going to be this morning. In John 4, here's what we're going to see. We're going to see a woman who is surrounded by community, but yet she's all alone. It's one of my favorite stories in the Bible. So this morning, as we look at this story in John 4, known as the woman at the well or the Samaritan woman, here's what I want us to see. I want us to see 4 tactics that the enemy uses to hold us hostage and how Jesus wants to set us free. Guys, I know the moment that I say we're talking about the woman at the well or the Samaritan woman, you hear the word woman and you're like, that's not for me. I'm going to go ahead and start looking for it. We're going to lunch. Listen, this is the longest conversation in the scriptures between Jesus and another person, and we don't even know her name. And I don't think that's a coincidence. I think John left her name out for a reason. So guess what? So that you could go ahead and just put your name there. Because if we're being honest, whether this is a woman or not, all of us can relate to the things that we're going to talk about here in a moment. Whether you're a male or female, whether you're young or old, whether you're brown or black or white or orange or green, it doesn't matter. Like I said a while ago, loneliness does not discriminate. And the enemy that we're facing is crafty. He's been at this game a long time and he knows what he's doing. So John chapter 4, Jesus is gaining in popularity. He's in the city or the town of Judea. He's gaining popularity, and with that popularity comes the crowds. And all of a sudden, we see in a moment that there's this religious drama that pops up, and they start arguing about who's baptizing more. I mean, is it this new guy named Jesus, or is it John the Baptizer? And so there's all of a sudden there's this weird nonsense going on. And Jesus, in this moment, moves away from the religious drama, and he always moves towards the broken, the lost, the desperate, and the hurting. And so I don't know how you walked in this morning, but here's what I know. If you came in this morning and you're struggling, if you're feeling a little lonely, if you're feeling broken, if you're hurting, here's what I want you to know. Jesus wants to move toward you today. And we're going to see how he does that in this story. John chapter 4, starting in verse 1. If you're there, say the Bible is true. It says, now when Jesus learned that the Pharisees had heard that Jesus was making and baptizing more disciples than John, he left Judea and departed again for Galilee. And he had to pass through Samaria. Go ahead and underline that, highlight it, circle it. We're going to come back to that in a moment. That's very important. It says that he had to go through Samaria. And so he came to a town of Samaria called Sychar, near the field that Jacob had given to his son Joseph, and Jacob's well was there. So Jesus, wearied as he was from his journey, was sitting beside the well, and it was about the 6th hour, or around noon. And a woman from Samaria came to draw water, and Jesus said to her, "Give me a drink." The very first tactic I want us to see in those verses, in those few scriptures, is this: the enemy wants to isolate you in your loneliness, but Jesus sees you and wants to meet you in your loneliness. Did you notice in those verses what time of day it was? It says that it's around the 6th, it's the 6th hour, or some translations may even say around noon. You may be asking yourself, okay, what does that have to do with anything? It's lunchtime. It has a lot to do with this story. See, it says that Jesus is sitting there at Jacob's well at noon, and he's waiting on someone. And then all of a sudden, a Samaritan woman shows up to draw water from the well. Here's what you've got to know. No one goes to the water well at noon. It's the middle of the day. It's the hottest part of the day. I mean, out here in East Texas, that'd be like us roofing, putting shingles on in the middle of the day, in the summer, in July, in the middle of the day. It's a disaster. Nobody wants to do it. But this woman, for some reason, she's coming to the water well at noon to draw water. No one does that. You either draw water early in the morning before it gets hot, or you draw water later in the evening when the sun goes down and the temperature starts to cool off a little bit. But for some reason, this woman decides to come at noon at the hottest part of the day. Here's what else you need to know about this. The water well, Jacob's well, in that culture, in her town, was not just where women went to draw water, although it was. It's also where women went to catch up on the town gossip as they were getting water. And so this woman is avoiding something. The fact that this woman is coming out to draw water at noon tells us something. She lives in this community. She's surrounded by people, but she's all alone. She's isolated, and she is pulled away from the people in her community. I mean, we all do this in one way or another, don't we? Or am I the only one? For whatever reason, we listen to the lies of the enemy, and what do? We withdraw. We avoid. We pull away when we should press in. We become emotionally distant. We isolate ourselves from other people. And as you heard last week from Pastor Todd, this is exactly what the enemy wants, isn't it? He wants to isolate you. He wants you to get you all alone and by yourself so that he can do his best work. And this is exactly what has happened to this woman in John 4. The enemy has completely isolated her. He's convinced her that no one sees her, that no one cares about her, that no one could possibly understand what she's going through. The enemy has convinced her that she is all alone in her loneliness. But this day is different. She's not alone. She shows up at noon, and Jesus is sitting there waiting on her. I mean, it's almost as if he knew she was going to show up at noon. Imagine that. And Jesus is just sitting there waiting to have a conversation with her. Don't miss this. Jesus sees her in her loneliness. And guess what? He sees you too. No matter where you are, no matter what you're going through this morning, no matter what you've been going through this past week, this past month, this past year, here's what I want you to know. He sees you. You're not alone. He wants to meet with you. The second thing we see in this story that the enemy does is this. The enemy distorts our self-worth, but Jesus wants to restore our worth. Picking up in verse 7 again, it says, "And a woman from Samaria came to draw water. Jesus said to her, 'Give me a drink.' And the Samaritan woman said to him, 'How is it that you, a Jew, ask for a drink from me, a woman from Samaria? For Jews have no dealings with Samaritans.'" See, you've got to understand the context of the culture and the environment that this woman lives in. Jews hated and despised Samaritans. This is 500 plus years of racial tension. In fact, no respectable Jew would ever say, "I must go through Samaria." You remember I said underline that? No Jew would ever say that. In fact, all Jews would do everything in their power to avoid Samaria. They didn't even want to walk near the town. They looked down their nose at Samaritans. They called them half-breed mutts. You see, Samaritans were neither Jew nor Gentile. They were half-breeds. The Jews thought they were pure, and they thought the Samaritans were impure and unclean. And so the Jews would do everything they could to avoid the Samaritans. So not only is this woman been listening to the lies of racism and hatred and feeling less than, but she's also a woman. And in their culture, women were not partners, they were property. They were owned by their men or by their spouse or by their significant other. They had no rights. Women were at the very, very bottom of the totem pole. They were just viewed as property. This woman in John 4 had listened to the lies of the enemy and the culture for so long that her value and self-worth was completely distorted. So it's understandable that she would ask Jesus in this moment, "How is it that you, a Jewish rabbi, would ask me, a Samaritan woman, for anything? Like, what are you even doing here? You Jews do everything you can to avoid even coming near our town. Why are you sitting here asking me for a drink? What's your motive? What do you want from me?" That's probably what she's thinking. Are you like every other man that I've ever met? Always wanting something else? She feels so unseen, so used, abused, and of no value. She's listened to the lies for far too long. Her self-worth is completely distorted. But don't miss this. Jesus in this moment wants to do something. He wants to restore her worth. Look what it says in verse 10. Jesus answered her, "Oh, if you knew the gift of God and who it is that is saying to you, 'Give me a drink,' you would have asked him and he would have given you living water." The woman said to him, "Sir, you have nothing to draw water with, and the well is deep." I want you to underline that right there. There's more to those words than just the words that she's saying. She says, "Where do you get this living water that you're talking about? Are you greater than our father Jacob? He's the one that gave us this well and drank from it himself, as did his sons and his livestock." And Jesus said to her, "Everyone who drinks of this water will be thirsty again. But whoever drinks of the water that I give him will never be thirsty again. The water that I will give him will become in him a spring of water welling up to eternal life." as Jesus starts to talk to this woman about what he wants to give her, what he wants to do in her, it's like she can't hear it. She can't see it. Her value and her mind is so distorted. She says to him, "You have nothing to draw this water with, and the well is too deep." I think in this moment, what she's really saying is, you have no idea who you're talking to. You have no idea how deep this well really is, how broken and lonely and messed up I am. She says, you have nothing to draw this water with. She's looking at him basically saying, you don't even have a clue about me. You don't know who you're talking to. And she's really also thinking, what do you want from me? Here's the reality. Jesus didn't want anything from her. He wanted to do something in her. He wanted to give her something that she really, really needed. This woman has listened to the lies of the enemy for so long that she can't hear what Jesus is saying. Her heart has become so hard, and her ears have become deaf to the truth. You see, so often, lies of the enemy are so loud in our loneliness that we can't hear the truth, no matter how bad we want to hear it. Have you ever met anyone like this? Like they're isolated, they're alone, their self-worth and their value is so distorted that no matter what you say to them, no matter how much you try to encourage them and build them up and pick them up, it's like it's falling on deaf ears. They can't hear it. This is this woman in this moment. She's been so beat down, so used, so abused, so isolated, so lonely, and listened to the lies for so long that the Savior of the world is standing there looking her in the face saying, I want to give you living water. If you only knew who's talking to you, you would have asked me for something, and I would have given you something greater than what you came out here for. And it's like she cannot hear it. She can only focus on the physical. It's just bouncing off. It's bouncing off her hard and calloused heart. It's bouncing off of all the scars that she suffered through the years. Just like this woman, in our loneliness, in our times of isolation, I think the enemy distorts our value and then also starts to deceive us in our loneliness. Here's what I mean by that. As he isolates us and distorts us, he begins to tell us and whisper to us, hey, this is what you really need over here. If you'll just get this, then you'll finally be satisfied. It's the false comforts of life that we run to in our loneliness. In this story, I would call it the empty wells, if you will, that we run to one after another, thinking maybe if I can just go to this one, then I'll finally be satisfied. I'll finally be happy. I'll finally experience joy. And so what do? We run after and we pursue these things with everything we've got. I've got to get a bigger house. I've got to get new cars. I've got to get a promotion at work. I've got to climb the corporate ladder. I need a new wife. I'm tired of this one. I need a new relationship. I need a new husband. I mean, we run to all of these things, do we not? Thinking that we're going to find true joy and true happiness in these comforts or these empty wells of life. Thinking that maybe this time things will be different. I was reminded of a good friend of mine. Had a buddy named BJ. that I went to college with and worked with for about 3 years. BJ and I were buddies. Worked every single week together. And at 22 years old, I graduated in December. He was going to graduate in May from the University of Texas in Austin. And he said, hey, wait on me, and here's what we'll do. We'll move to California, and I've got an uncle out there who's an attorney in Beverly Hills, and we'll go out there and we'll chase after this American dream. We'll go out to California, and you can go to law school there, and I'm gonna go out there and I'm gonna chase this career in writing and producing films and acting and all of this stuff. And I said, great, sounds like a plan. And so I began saving up my money and waiting for him to graduate. And in that 6-month window, the Lord radically saved me. And we got down to the wire, and I looked at BJ and I said, hey man, I can't go with you. And he said, man, that stinks, but I'm going. And BJ took off, chasing after all of his goals and all of his dreams, thinking that that's exactly what he needed. And let me tell you, church, he accomplished it all. He accomplished it all. Like by the world standards, you would look at BJ's life and go, man, this dude has arrived. He's made it. He's become a famous actor. He's on shows like CSI New York. He's on, he's been on Suits. He's been on all these different shows. He's won 9 Emmy Awards. He's got a house in Austin, a house in Hollywood. He's got a house in New York. He's got more cars and more homes and more wealth and more women and more drugs and more alcohol and more fame and more fortune. And guess what? At the end of every one of those things, BJ was more broken and more isolated and more alone than he's ever been. And this past fall, in October, one day before his 45th birthday, BJ sat in his home in Austin, Texas, and he listened to the lies of the enemy. And he said, I'm all alone. Nobody sees me. Nobody cares. Nobody loves me. I might as well just end it all. And he took his own life that night. Isolated and all alone. Listen what Jeremiah the prophet says in chapter 2, verse 13. He says, for my people have committed 2 evils. They have forsaken me, the fountain of living waters, and they've hewed out cisterns for themselves, broken cisterns that can hold no water. The Lord is speaking through Jeremiah to his people, and he's saying, here's what my people have done. Here's what they're guilty of. They have turned from me, and they're running after these broken, empty wells that will never satisfy, that can hold no water. And he says, it is evil. It only ends in destruction and emptiness and brokenness and loneliness and a life separated from me, the fountain of living water. The third tactic that the enemy wants to hold us hostage with is this. Or the third thing that we see the enemy wants to do is this. He wants to hold us hostage, but Jesus wants to set us free. In this story at the woman at the well, I love, as you read through it, and we're going to see it in just a moment, how patient Jesus is with this woman. Like, aren't you, I don't know about you, but aren't you grateful for the patience of the Lord? Like that he never gets frustrated or irritated with us. He never just throws up his hands and walks away and says, I guess you're gonna have to learn the hard way, right? Like he is so patient with this woman. And Jesus continues in his patience to push the conversation further and further and further because he's wanting her to see something. He's wanting her to see that her real need is spiritual, not physical. No matter how many times she keeps saying, where's your bucket? How are you going to get this water? He's like, do you not understand? It's not about the bucket. It's not about the water. It's not even about this well. It's what I want to do in you. And so Jesus finally cuts through all of the metaphors. In verse 16, look what he says. He says, hey, here's what I need you to do. Go call your husband. You may be going, okay, what about that? Well, listen. Again, Jewish rabbi talking to a woman. Women are not their own, their property. So technically in their culture, it's illegal for Jesus to have this conversation with her, apart from her husband. Jesus says, I need you to go call your husband because I need to have a conversation. We're about to have a come to Jesus meeting, if you will. I need you to go get your husband. And she says, I don't have a husband. She's not lying, is she? Jesus goes, you're right. In fact, you've had 5 husbands. And the man you're currently living with is not your husband either. I don't know if you're like me, but when I read that, it's like, dang, Jesus. You got to read it with a little bit of sarcasm, don't you? You're like, did you really just go there? Like, you don't even know this woman. You just met her. You just started a conversation with her. And in this conversation, you're just going to call her out like that and be like, hey, go get your husband. Oh, you're right. You've had 5. And the one you're shacking up and living with now, he's not your husband either. I mean, this seems harsh, doesn't it? When you read it, you're like, Jesus, did you really have to call her out on being married and divorced 5 times and now living with somebody who's not her husband? It seems harsh and insensitive, but listen to me, church. It is actually his loving kindness. It is his grace. This woman has been held hostage for far too long. And listen, anytime Jesus exposes our sin and our brokenness, it's not to shame us. It's actually to free us. So anytime the Holy Spirit starts to press in and starts to convict you of your sin and your brokenness, it's not to make you feel bad or feel guilty or feel shame. It's to actually set you free and to call you up out of that mess and deliver you from it. And that's what he's wanting to do for this woman in this moment. He wants to free her. And this woman in this moment, you got to love her. Like in these texts, we say, God bless her, right? Or bless her heart. She does exactly what you and I would do. She doesn't want to go there. The wounds are too deep, too painful. She's full of shame and regret. So what does she do? She changes the subject real quick. She starts talking about religion. She starts asking Jesus, hey, Jesus, are you Baptist or Methodist? Jesus, are you Lutheran or Presbyterian? It actually says, she goes, hey, Jesus, you Jews say that you should worship on this mountain. We say it's on this mountain. What do you think? She's trying to just chase rabbits to avoid the real situation at hand. And Jesus knows exactly what she's doing in this moment. He doesn't get frustrated with her like most of us would. He doesn't lose his cool or lose his temper. He simply answers her. And he says, a time is coming and is now here where location will not matter, but true worshipers will worship the Father in spirit and in truth. In verse 25, the woman said to him, I know that the Messiah is coming, he who is called the Christ. And when he comes, he will tell us all things. I'm sure in this moment, Jesus just paused. Like everything in this conversation is leading up to this moment right here. And so Jesus is probably thinking, finally. And he pauses and he looks this woman in the eyes with a big, big smile on his face. And Jesus said to her, I who speak to you am he. In other words, Jesus looks at her and he says, I'm the one. Like, I'm the one you've been looking for. I'm the one you've been longing for your entire life. I'm the one I'm the only one that can truly satisfy. I'm the one. I'm the one that wants to transform your heart and transform your life. I'm the one. This is that mind-blowing, like mic drop moment, if you will. This woman finally sees him for who he is. It's like the scales fall from her eyes. And she finally sees the man in front of her as the Savior of the world. And what does she do in this moment? She runs. Look what it says. You see, the enemy, here's the last thing he wants to do, is the enemy wants to keep you from community, but Jesus wants you to run towards community. Look what it says that this woman does in verse 27. It says, just then his disciples came back, and they marveled that he was talking with a woman, but no one said, what do you seek? Or why are you talking with her? So the woman left her water jar and went away into town and said to the people, come see a man who told me all that I ever did. Can this be the Christ? I love this. This woman came to the well at noon, broken, isolated, empty, and all alone, trying to avoid everyone. She meets Jesus at the well. He sees her. He restores her. Then he frees her. And immediately, what does she do? It says that she drops her buckets, or she drops her water jars, if you will. The very thing that she came out there to get didn't matter anymore. She drops it because she'd received something greater. And it says she turns and she runs back to the very people that she was out there at noon trying to avoid. Something has radically changed in this woman. She runs back to her community. She goes to tell her story about this man named Jesus that told her all that she had ever done. She didn't wait till she knew enough and had all the answers. She knew that she needed to go and get people connected to Jesus. I'm sure in this moment as she's running back to town, she's thinking to herself, surely there's someone else. Like, surely there's someone else back in my town that feels the way I feel. Surely there's someone in my town that if I asked them the question, have you ever been in a room or in a town full of people and felt all alone, they would raise their hand. I'm sure she was thinking to herself, there's got to be someone that's schedule is really, really full, but their life feels pretty empty. I'm sure she was thinking as she ran back to town, there's got to be people in my community that feel isolated, that feel like they have no value, that nobody sees them and that nobody cares. I'm sure there's people in my town that feel like they're not really known by anyone. And so she runs back to them to tell them, you've got to come meet this man. He changed everything about everything for me. And don't miss this. I think she also knew deep down inside that she needed to be connected to these people just as much as they needed to be connected to him. She knew herself well enough that she knew herself well enough that in 3 days from now, when maybe the newness wore off a little bit, she knew what she would tend to do. She would start to pull away. She would start to drift. She would start to isolate again. She would start to listen to the lies of the enemy before long. And she knew that she needed someone else in her life, a good friend, a small group, a community of people that would surround her, people that see her, people that love her, people that care about her, and that as soon as they see her starting to drift and starting to isolate again, they'll walk up and grab her and say, not anymore. You don't live like that anymore. You're not alone in your loneliness. You have brothers and sisters, you have friends, you have community, people that see you, people that love you, people that care about you. We all need this, don't we? Don't we? I can remember it's just about 2 months ago now, I was walking through a season where I was just struggling. And I was doing a lot of what we just talked about. Like I was just almost not even consciously aware of it, but just making excuses and saying, well, I'm just busy, or I'm just stressed, or I'm just tired. But what I was doing is I was drifting, and I was pulling away, and I was starting to isolate. And lucky for me, my wife knows me well enough to go, I see what you're doing. I know what you're doing, don't do it. But more than that, more than my wife, I also had a good friend. One of my buddies looked at me and he said, hey, let's go to lunch. And we went to lunch and we sat down and he said, are you okay? And in that moment, I just had to be honest. I had to look at him and say, man, I'm not. And he said, yeah, I could tell. He said, I know you well enough to know that you're not okay. I can tell that you've been pulling away and that you've been drifting and that you've been isolating. And I'm not gonna let you do it anymore. I love you too much. And so as he and I talked over lunch that day, we made a commitment to one another that we would no longer let the enemy hold us hostage, that we would hold each other accountable, that we would go to lunch every single Thursday just to check on each other and say, how you really doing? Don't play games with me. Be honest, where are you at? And if you don't have a friend like that today, you're in trouble. We all need friends. We all need community. We all need people that see us, that love us, that care about us, that know us well enough that they can see when we start to drift. They see when we start to isolate. They can see that we're being defeated and destroyed by the lies of the enemy, and that they will in that moment intervene, that they will grab us by the collar and pull us back in and say, you're not doing that on my watch. I wish to God my buddy BJ would have had somebody. I wish I could have been there for him. For those of us in this room, it's not too late. If you don't have community and you don't have people, you need to find them real quick. Don't let the enemy have another day in your life where he's holding you hostage. Jesus wants to do something. He wants to meet with you. He wants to set you free. And when he sets you free, he wants you to run not only towards him, but towards other people and other relationships. Would you close your eyes and bow your heads? I want to ask you a couple of questions as we wrap this thing up this morning. Where are you this morning? Have you isolated yourself and pulled away from God and others? Are you listening to the lies of the enemy? In your loneliness, are you running to the empty wells of life, hoping to find something that will satisfy, only to find yourself more broken and more lonely than before? Are you avoiding community and relationships, or are you running towards community? Father, you know every single person in this room. You know every single person watching online. You see them. You love them. You care for them. You know them. And you want to give them living water today. Father, I pray that you would meet every single person at their greatest point of need. Father, would you speak loud and clear to them? Would they hear your voice over all the lies of the enemy? And when they hear your voice, Father, would they respond? Would they know that they don't have to stay bound up by these lies and by these strongholds any longer? Father, would you do a supernatural work in this place today? And when you do, we'll give you all the glory. It's in Christ's name we pray. Amen.